Beneath the dazzling crystal lights of New York, Gregory Harlow appeared every bit the perfect gentleman. An expensive tuxedo, a confident smile, and on his arm a blonde young woman, polished as if she had just stepped off a magazine cover. But she was not his wife. To his colleagues, Gregory always claimed Celeste was too busy, too focused on her career, too tired to attend parties. The truth was far more cruel. He was ashamed. Ashamed of her brown skin, of her natural curls, of the very woman who had once fed him, paid his law school tuition, and built the dream he now flaunted. Gregory believed tonight was his triumph, the moment he would step fully into the high society he craved. But then, the click of heels touched the staircase. The entire room fell silent. Celeste appeared, more radiant than ever, her hand resting on the arm of Malcolm Pierce, the man everyone admired. She hadn't come to make a scene. She had come to turn the game upside down. And before the clock struck midnight, everyone would know the truth. Who had really built this empire? If you've ever stayed silent just to keep a marriage intact, stay with me. This story is for you. Celeste Harlow was brilliant. An architect trained at MIT, she had designed buildings that touched the New York skyline. Yet her greatest work was invisible. It was the life she built for Gregory. She carried him through law school, working late nights and weekends. She balanced invoices by day and sketched designs long after midnight. She gave up promotions so he could chase his next opportunity. At home, she moved like quiet rhythm. Dinner ready before he walked in. Coffee steaming beside his notes. Her hands steady on his collar before every meeting. She cheered his victories as if they were her own. No one in the room ever knew she had been the one holding him up. In Celeste's reflection, there was both brilliance and exhaustion. A woman who dreamed of her own firm. A woman who silenced those dreams to keep his alive. She believed love meant sacrifice, that marriage meant lifting him higher than herself. What she never guessed was how small that made her seem in his eyes. Celeste thought she was building their future. Gregory saw only that she stood in his shadow. Gregory Harlow had climbed from nothing into the marble towers of Wall Street. Ambition pulsed through him. Every bonus, every suit, every invitation into New York's elite circles fed the hunger inside him. He loved the weight of his name on the guest list. He loved the whisper of admiration from clients who shook his hand. But with every rung he climbed, Celeste felt further away. Her natural hair, her dark skin, her unpolished honesty. Once he had called them beautiful. Now they looked out of place beside the diamond necklaces and pale arms of his colleagues' wives. He began to tell himself she did not fit, that the world he wanted did not have room for her. He spoke of networking dinners as boring for her, of galas as work events. He crafted excuses, each one rehearsed. Gregory told himself it was strategy, that appearances mattered, that his image had to be perfect. He did not see how the mask he polished was built from shame, nor did he see the slow fracture forming inside his home. The first cracks were subtle. A canceled dinner. A business trip extended one night too long. Gregory began to say, "It's better if you don't come this time." His tone was casual, his smile practiced. Celeste heard the words, but not the truth. She thought he was protecting her from tedium. She thought he valued her time. She never suspected he was hiding her. At home, she continued her routines. Meals cooked, clothes pressed, notes of encouragement tucked inside his briefcase. She told herself this was partnership. She told herself it was love. But silence grew heavier between them. Gregory stayed later at the office. He scrolled his phone when she spoke. He turned his back in bed. Celeste wondered if success had simply hardened him. She wondered if he was tired. What she could not see was the new world opening before him, a world where she did not belong. And slowly, Gregory began to believe his life would shine brighter if he erased the woman who had made it possible. Her name was Evelyn Drake. She was young, polished, with hair the color of champagne. In Gregory's eyes, she was not just beautiful, she was acceptable. She fit the photographs in the society pages. She fit the image he longed to project. At first it was business, a conversation at the firm, a laugh that lingered too long. But soon she was at his side in private dinners. Soon her perfume clung to his jacket. Evelyn was everything Celeste was not in the eyes of his world. Pale skin, straight hair, a mirror of what he thought success should look like. Gregory convinced himself it was harmless, that he deserved someone who matched his ambition, that this new woman was proof he had arrived. Every smile she flashed across a crowded room fed the lie inside him. He did not see betrayal. He saw validation. He saw doors opening wider, heads nodding with approval. In Evelyn's reflection, Gregory thought he saw his future. What he never imagined was how fragile that future would become the moment Celeste decided to step into the light. It began with one simple lie. Gregory stood among his colleagues at the firm, glass in hand, voice smooth and practiced. When someone asked about Celeste, he smiled and said, "She's too busy with her projects. She couldn't make it tonight." The words were easy. They slid from his tongue like truth. But behind the lie was shame. Not shame of absence, shame of presence. He did not want them to see his wife. He did not want her skin, her hair, her proud beauty standing beside him. He believed it would dim the glow of the world he wanted to join. In that moment, he erased her. He painted her as unavailable, as uninterested. His colleagues nodded politely, accepting the story. No one knew that his silence was hiding the woman who had given him everything. Gregory felt a strange relief. The lie worked. No one questioned him. No one pressed further. He could stand taller with Evelyn at his side. What he did not realize was that each lie left a scar. And sooner or later, scars demand to be seen. Celeste felt it first in his eyes. The way they slid past her when she spoke about joining him at a dinner. The way his smile tightened whenever she mentioned another gala. It was small, subtle, but it stung. She told herself she was imagining things, that Gregory was only tired, that his new responsibilities were weighing on him. Still, she noticed how his calendar no longer included her, how invitations disappeared before she saw them. At home, their laughter grew rare. Conversation drifted into silence. He scrolled through his phone while she set the table. He left early, came back late. Celeste tried to believe it was just work, but her chest tightened with every excuse. For the first time, she wondered if he was ashamed. Not of her actions, but of her presence. The thought was sharp, and she pushed it away. Yet doubt had been planted. And once planted, doubt has a way of growing in the quiet corners of the night. It was late one evening when Celeste passed by his study. The door was slightly open. His voice carried through the crack, low and urgent. "You know how it is," Gregory said. "These events are about image, about perception. She just doesn't fit." Celeste froze. Every muscle stiffened. She heard the silence of his colleague, then the reply. "But she's brilliant. Everyone admires her." Gregory's tone hardened. "It's not about that. It's about appearances. And right now, she's not the image I need." The words struck her like a blade. Not the tired excuses, not the missed dinners. This was different. This was truth. He was ashamed of her skin, her hair, the woman she was. Celeste stood in the hallway, breath caught in her chest. Years of sacrifice replayed in her mind. Every late night, every dollar earned, every dream she buried, all dismissed in a sentence. She pressed her hand to the wall to steady herself. The pain was sharp, and it was final. Celeste did not cry. She did not storm into the room or demand answers. She walked back quietly, her steps steady. She sat at her desk, opened her planner, and stared at the pages. Something inside her shifted. If Gregory was ashamed, she would no longer carry his shame. If he could not see her worth, she would show the world herself. Her love had been steady, her sacrifice deep, but her dignity was not negotiable. She picked up the phone. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. The first number she dialed was one she had kept for years, always unanswered. Malcolm Pierce, entrepreneur, innovator, a man who had once told her, "When you're ready, call me." When his voice answered, warm and certain, Celeste spoke with calm resolve. "It's Celeste Harlow. I think it's time we talked." That single call was not just a business move. It was the first brick in the foundation of a new life. Malcolm Pierce had watched Celeste's career from afar. He knew her designs. He knew her talent. And he had always known she carried more than her share of weight. When she called, he did not hesitate. "Celeste," he said, "I've been waiting for this." His tone was steady, filled with respect. He spoke not as a man rescuing her, but as one who recognized her strength. He offered her a position in his firm, a chance to lead projects that matched her vision. For the first time in years, Celeste felt seen. Not as Gregory's wife, not as an accessory, but as herself. Her mind raced, but her heart steadied. She realized she did not need Gregory's approval. She had never needed it. That night, she closed her laptop with quiet certainty. A door had opened, and behind it stood someone who valued her for her brilliance, not her appearance. Celeste knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she also knew she would no longer walk it in the shadows. She had found an ally, and through him she had found herself again. Celeste began her transformation quietly. She called Simone, her old friend and stylist, a woman who had dressed senators and celebrities. Together, they worked late into the night, sketching gowns, studying fabrics, testing hairstyles. For years, Celeste had softened her look to make Gregory comfortable. Now she chose what made her feel powerful. Her hair was styled in a crown that framed her face with elegance. Her gown was bold, cut to perfection, made by a designer who celebrated her heritage. Jewelry gleamed, but it was her posture that shone most. Shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes clear. As she stood in the mirror, Celeste saw herself differently. Not as a wife who had been hidden, but as a woman returning to her own light. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I am enough." The transformation was not only on the outside. With each fitting, each change, a deeper shift took place. Shame was replaced with pride, silence with strength. Celeste was not preparing to impress. She was preparing to reclaim. The woman who once made herself small was gone. In her place stood someone ready to be seen. Gregory walked into the gala with Evelyn on his arm. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above, music filled the hall, and heads turned as they entered. He felt taller, lighter. This was the moment he had wanted for months. The approving glances, the nods of recognition, the whispers of admiration. They wrapped around him like armor. He believed he had finally won. He believed he had finally built the image of success. Evelyn's pale beauty glittered under the lights, her gown hugging every curve. Gregory looked at her and thought, "This is what they expect. This is how I belong." As colleagues approached, he introduced her smoothly. He laughed at their compliments. Each smile fed his ego. Each handshake confirmed the lie he lived. In the corner of his mind, there was still a shadow of Celeste. But he pushed it down, convinced that no one missed her, that no one noticed. Tonight was his night. Tonight, he thought, he had erased his past and replaced it with perfection. The music shifted. The room hushed. Guests turned toward the staircase as if pulled by an unseen force. And there she was, Celeste Harlow, radiant, commanding, breathtaking. She did not rush. She moved with calm grace, every step a declaration. Her gown shimmered like liquid midnight. Her hair, styled in an intricate crown, caught the light with quiet strength. The transformation was complete, not into someone new, but into the woman she had always been. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then a ripple moved through the crowd. Murmurs, gasps, eyes widened. Conversations stalled. People who had ignored her before now could not look away. At the bottom of the stairs, Celeste paused. Her gaze swept the hall, not searching, not pleading, simply claiming space that was always hers. Gregory saw her from across the room. His throat tightened. His chest hollowed. He had never imagined this. The wife he had tried to hide had returned, and in that single moment, it was clear. He could not erase her. Colleagues rushed forward. "Celeste, what a surprise!" Her name carried warmth, admiration, delight. Richard Blackstone, Gregory's managing partner, smiled genuinely as he shook her hand. "We've missed you," he said. "Your work on Meridian Tower is extraordinary." Around her, the circle grew. Questions about her projects, praise for her designs, words of respect that Gregory had long withheld. Celeste answered with composure, her voice steady, her smile serene. Evelyn's grip on Gregory's arm tightened. The glitter in her eyes began to fade. The comparisons were inevitable, and Evelyn was already losing. Gregory's face flushed. He stood frozen, watching his wife, command the room he thought belonged to him. The admiration that he craved, the respect he fought for, was flowing freely to her. Every nod, every smile, every handshake, they belonged to Celeste. And in that moment, the foundation of Gregory's world began to crack. Gregory finally pushed through the crowd, forcing a smile. "Celeste," he said, voice strained, "what are you doing here?" Celeste turned, calm and unshaken. Her eyes met his, steady as stone. "I had a little time tonight," she said softly. "Thought I'd see what was worth keeping me hidden." Her words slid like glass across his chest. Around them, silence deepened. Faces leaned closer. Evelyn shifted, uneasy, sensing the shift in power. Gregory tried to laugh it off. "You know how busy these nights are." But his voice cracked. Celeste did not raise hers. She didn't need to. Her poise was louder than any accusation. "You always said perception matters," she continued. "Perhaps tonight they'll see the truth." His mouth opened, then closed. He had no answer. The lie was unraveling, thread by thread. Celeste had not shouted. She had not accused. She had simply spoken, and it left Gregory with nothing to stand on. The silence shattered when Evelyn's voice cut through the room. "What is this?" she snapped, her words sharp, her tone trembling with jealousy. She pulled at Gregory's arm, demanding an answer, her voice rising louder than the music. "You told me she wouldn't be here. You told me she was out of the picture." Heads turned. Conversations stopped. The glittering ballroom froze, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding. Evelyn's anger spilled into the open, her voice echoing against marble walls. She no longer looked composed or polished. Her fury exposed the truth Gregory had tried so hard to hide. Celeste stood still, her hands folded lightly, her face calm. The contrast was stark, one woman unraveling, the other unshaken. Guests began to whisper. Some gasped. Some stared at Gregory with narrowed eyes. Evelyn's words cut deeper than she realized. Each accusation stripped away the image Gregory had built. He felt the stares like a weight pressing on his chest. The ballroom that once admired him now watched with suspicion. What had been his moment of triumph was collapsing. The perfect mask cracked, and through it poured the raw truth of betrayal, deceit, and shame. When the noise died down, Celeste finally spoke. Her voice was low, steady, carrying across the hall without force. "He's not ashamed of cheating," she said softly, her eyes on Gregory. "He's ashamed of me." The words fell like stone in water. Ripples spread through the room. No one spoke. Every face turned to Gregory, waiting, searching for denial. None came. Celeste did not tremble. She did not raise her voice. Her strength was in her calm, in the unshakable truth she carried. "For years," she continued, "I stood behind him. I gave him everything. But he decided I wasn't the image he wanted. He erased me, because my skin did not fit his idea of success." Gasps filled the air. The wound she revealed was deeper than infidelity. It was rejection of her very being. Celeste's poise made her words sharper than any shout could have been. Gregory shifted, his face pale, lips parting, but no words forming. The truth had been spoken, and in that moment, no denial could save him. Richard Blackstone, the firm's managing partner, stepped forward. His expression was cold, eyes sharp with disappointment. "Gregory," he said, voice controlled but firm. "Is this true?" Gregory stammered. "It's not. It's complicated." But the words rang hollow. The murmurs around them grew louder. Colleagues shook their heads, their respect evaporating. The truth hung heavy, undeniable. Richard's jaw tightened. "You lied to us. You lied about your wife. You chose deception over integrity. That is not the man I trusted to represent this firm." Gregory tried to speak again, but each attempt collapsed under the weight of silence. He could feel the disgust in the room. Once these faces had nodded in admiration. Now they looked at him with pity, with anger, with scorn. The applause he once craved was gone. In its place came the sound of his reputation breaking. Every handshake, every compliment he had stolen from Celeste, vanished in a single night. He was no longer the man in control. He was the man exposed, standing bare before the judgment of his world. Celeste did not argue. She did not linger. She turned gracefully, and at her side stood Malcolm Pierce. His presence was steady, his respect clear in the way he offered his arm. Celeste accepted, and together they began to walk toward the doors. The crowd parted without a word. Eyes followed her, not with pity, but with admiration. Some whispered her name with awe. Some nodded with quiet respect. In that moment, Celeste was not the wife who had been erased. She was the woman who could not be ignored. Gregory reached out, his voice breaking. "Celeste, wait." But she did not turn. She did not need to. Every step she took was a statement. She had no reason to stay in a room that had once hidden her. The silence that followed her exit was heavy. For those left behind, it felt like watching a queen reclaim her crown. For Gregory, it felt like the world walking out the door with her. The night ended with a sentence that would change everything. Richard Blackstone approached Gregory, his voice low but unyielding. "Clean out your office. We'll discuss the terms of your departure on Monday." The words struck harder than any blow. Gregory's heart sank. His career, the empire he had built on lies and appearances, was collapsing. The firm that had once elevated him was now casting him out. Around him, colleagues avoided his gaze. Evelyn had slipped away, leaving only the echo of her anger behind. The glittering ballroom that once made him feel powerful now seemed cold, hostile, suffocating. He had lost more than his job. He had lost respect. He had lost trust. He had lost the woman who had built his life. As he stood alone in the fading music and dimming lights, Gregory realized the truth he had ignored for years. Everything he thought he needed, money, status, image, was nothing without the love he had thrown away. Days after the gala, Celeste's phone would not stop ringing. Reporters asked for interviews, firms sent offers, but one project rose above them all: the Brookfield development, a sustainable housing initiative that promised to reshape parts of Manhattan. Celeste had been quietly preparing it for months, but now her name was on everyone's lips. Magazines called her visionary. Colleagues she had once stood behind now stepped forward to praise her. She was invited to panels, to dinners, to speak as the leader she had always been. The woman Gregory had tried to hide was suddenly the center of attention. With Malcolm's firm supporting her, she signed the Brookfield contract. The numbers alone dwarfed anything Gregory had ever brought home. For the first time, she held financial power entirely her own, undeniable and unchallenged. Celeste felt something deeper than triumph. She felt freedom. She no longer measured her worth by anyone else's approval. She had rebuilt her life not in Gregory's shadow, but in her own light, and this time no one could dim it. Gregory's fall was swift. Evelyn vanished within days, her last message short and cold. "I won't be ruined with you." Friends who once toasted him at rooftop bars stopped returning his calls. Colleagues crossed the street rather than meet his eyes. His phone, once buzzing with invitations, lay silent on the counter. At night, he sat alone, staring at glasses of scotch that no longer brought comfort. He told himself it was temporary, that someone would offer him a way back. But weeks stretched into months, and the silence grew louder. He scrolled through headlines with Celeste's name at the top, her speeches, her designs, her photograph in magazines where Evelyn had once appeared. Each article reminded him of the truth. He had lost more than his career. He had lost the one person who had given him everything. The applause he had chased was gone. In its place was isolation, and Gregory began to understand that loneliness is the sharpest punishment of all. Celeste searched the city for a place of her own. Not the cold penthouse Gregory had chosen, filled with his taste and his trophies. She wanted space that reflected her. She found it in Tribeca, a loft with tall windows, brick walls, and beams of steel. Light poured across wide floors, and the air carried a sense of possibility. It was raw, modern, and warm. It felt alive. When she walked through the space, she imagined sketches pinned to the walls, dinner with friends who celebrated her, quiet evenings with music drifting through open windows. For the first time in years, she felt home. Signing the lease was more than a transaction. It was a declaration. This was not just an apartment. It was proof that she could stand on her own, design her own future, and live without apology. The loft became her sanctuary, her symbol of freedom. Every brick, every beam reminded her of a truth she had nearly forgotten. Her life was hers to shape. Months later, Celeste stood at a podium in Chicago. The hall was filled with architects, journalists, and students. Behind her, the Brookfield Project glowed on the screen. She spoke with clarity, describing not just structures of glass and steel, but communities designed to give families dignity and space to thrive. She told stories of homes filled with light, of children growing in places built for them. Her voice carried conviction, and her words stirred the room. When she finished, silence lingered. Then applause erupted, rising like thunder. The audience stood, clapping until their hands were sore. Celeste bowed her head slightly, but her eyes shone. She had dreamed of this moment, being recognized for her own work, her own vision. The headlines that followed called her a leader in sustainable design. Her face appeared on magazine covers across the country. This was not fame born of scandal. This was recognition earned, and it was hers alone. Gregory now lived in a cramped apartment in Queens. The marble halls of Wall Street were far behind him. His suits no longer fit, his watch sat unused on the dresser. Nights stretched long and heavy. He tried to keep busy, sending resumes to smaller firms, but few responded. Those who did offered little more than polite rejection. His name was stained, his reputation gone. The loneliness pressed hardest. He would sit with the television on, volume low, staring at nothing. The silence reminded him of Celeste's absence, of Evelyn's departure, of the friends who had disappeared. One evening, he scrolled past a video of Celeste speaking at the Chicago conference. She stood radiant, commanding the room, every word drawing cheers. He muted the sound, unable to bear it, yet unable to look away. The man who once had everything was left with nothing. Gregory finally understood the cost of his choices. The money was gone, the love was gone, and the life he thought he had built had never been his at all. Months passed before Gregory found the courage to write. He sat at a small table in his apartment, pen in hand, the city noise muted beyond the window. For the first time, he dropped the lies. "Dear Celeste," he began, "I know you owe me nothing, but I must tell you the truth. I destroyed us. Not you, not fate. Me. I let shame guide my choices. I let other people's approval mean more than the woman who gave me everything. You were never too little. You were always more than enough. It was I who was small. It was I who was broken." The words spilled across the page. He confessed the poison he had carried, the fear that made him trade love for image, truth for appearance. He admitted that Evelyn was not love, only escape, that every night since he had lived with regret. He closed the letter with no plea for forgiveness. "I do not ask you to return. I only ask you to know. I finally see you, and I am sorry." He folded the paper, knowing it was all he had left to give. The letter reached Celeste weeks later, forwarded from her old address. She sat by the window of her Tribeca loft, holding the envelope in her hands. The handwriting was familiar, shaky, unlike the man who once stood so tall. She read slowly. Line by line she absorbed his words. She felt the sorrow, the regret, the cracks in his pride. For a moment her chest tightened. For a moment she remembered the years she had loved him, but when she finished she folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Her eyes were calm, her heart steady. It was too late. The woman who once would have grasped at those words no longer existed. Celeste did not hate Gregory. She did not even resent him. She simply understood that love built on shame could never be rebuilt. Her life had moved forward. His letter was a mirror of the past, honest, but no longer hers to carry. She smiled faintly, whispering, "Goodbye." Celeste's days filled with color again. She poured herself into her projects, creating communities that gave families light and dignity. She attended dinners not as someone's guest, but as the woman everyone came to hear. Malcolm was often at her side. Their friendship deepened, built on respect and laughter. But Celeste knew her happiness did not depend on him. It came from within. She had reclaimed the dreams she once buried. She had learned to love herself, fully and without apology. In quiet evenings she cooked in her loft, music drifting through open windows. She smiled at her reflection without hesitation. She no longer measured herself against anyone else's image of success. She was her own measure. Malcolm admired her strength, but he also knew her joy came not from him but from the woman she had chosen to become. And that was enough. For Celeste, the greatest love she had found was the love she had finally given herself. 6 months later, Celeste stood at an international conference. Thousands filled the hall. Cameras streamed her face to millions more. She looked out at the audience, her voice steady. "The most important building I ever demolished," she said, "was the cage I built for myself." The words cut through the silence. She spoke of years of sacrifice, of shrinking to fit someone else's vision. She spoke of betrayal, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She told the women listening that they were not too much, not too ambitious, not too successful. They were exactly enough. Tears glistened in the eyes of strangers. Applause rose, wave after wave, until the hall shook. Celeste smiled, not for recognition, but for truth. She had torn down the walls that once held her, and now her story was a light for others. Celeste Harlow's story is not just about betrayal. It is about rebirth. It belongs to every woman who has ever given too much, who has ever been asked to hide, who has ever felt her worth questioned. For years, she carried someone else's dreams, believing love meant silence and sacrifice. But when the mask was torn away, she discovered something greater than survival. She discovered herself. Her journey tells us one truth. You are not too much. You are not too strong, too ambitious, too intelligent, or too beautiful. You are exactly enough. And the people who cannot stand beside your light were never meant to walk your path. Tonight, remember Celeste not only as a woman who rose from betrayal, but as a symbol of what happens when a woman chooses herself. Her triumph is proof that dignity, courage, and self-love are stronger than shame. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to join us as we bring more stories of women rising from the shadows into their own light. Because when one woman rises, she carries countless others with her, and like Celeste, we were always meant to rise.